She buried her husband at 49. Her abuser lived to 94. That sentence had lived rent-free in her mind for years. It wasn't a quote. It wasn't a headline. It was her life, her truth. Mara sat on the second pew at her husband's funeral, still wearing the navy blue cardigan he loved. The one he said made her eyes look like midnight. His coffin had just begun to lower into the wet ground, and all she could think about was Harold. Not her Harold, the other one, Harold Griggs, her stepfather, the man who broke everything soft in her when she was a child. Her bones, her voice, her ability to trust silence, the man who hadn't been in her life for 37 years, but who somehow was still in her life every day by the simple fact that he was alive. That morning before the service, she saw his name trending on a local obituary site, not because he had died, but because he hadn't. At 94, he was photographed smiling in a community garden, holding a young nurse's hand, sipping ginger tea, looking peaceful. She wanted to feel nothing, but rage came back like it always did, not loud, not flaming, just slow, acidic, internal. It was the question she never dared ask out loud. Why do evil people live longer? Was it because they were stronger, crueler, more determined to stay? Or was there something in the universe, in energy and biology and karma, that allowed the unjust to cheat death? Her therapist once said the body remembers everything even when the mind doesn't. But Mara's body didn't just remember. It waited for justice that never came, waited for balance that never arrived, waited for a moment when life would finally make sense. If you find value in real stories told with clarity and truth, make sure to subscribe to stay informed with Clarity Core. The first time Harold hit her, she was 9. It was over something small, a broken picture frame. She remembered the glass slicing into her foot as she ran down the hallway, crying, confused, more than scared. She didn't understand punishment then, only pain. The second time, he didn't use his hands. He used words. Words that stuck longer, harder. You're weak like your mother, pretty but useless. You don't deserve love until you learn respect. Her mother said nothing. She just stared at the television and whispered, "He's just tired, baby." Mara spent years believing that evil was loud, violent, drunk. But Harold proved otherwise. Evil could be polite, clean-shaven, smelling like peppermint mouthwash. Evil could tuck you in at night and still shatter your self-worth before breakfast. And yet he never got sick, even when Mara moved out, even when she went to college, even when she told her mother in tears what he had done and her mother said that was a long time ago. Harold stayed healthy, still played chess on Wednesdays, still walked without a cane at 80. He never went to therapy, never changed his diet, never repented, and never apologized. Mara, meanwhile, had lived with night sweats, chronic fatigue, endometriosis, and 2 miscarriages. Her body had become a battlefield of quiet wars no one saw. One day, while waiting in the clinic, she overheard a podcast playing from a nurse's phone. It was a voice, calm, firm American, talking about energy. Your thoughts are electric. Your feelings are magnetic. The body doesn't forget who you pretend to be. She asked the nurse who it was. Joe Dispenza, she said. He teaches people how to heal themselves, not just from trauma, but from how they think about trauma. Mara didn't roll her eyes like she would have 5 years ago. Something about the phrase, "who you pretend to be," landed like a needle in her chest. She didn't know it yet, but that line would change everything. That night, she sat alone with a journal. Not her therapy one, a blank one, untouched, free of exercises and prompts, just pages. At the top, she wrote, "What if healing isn't about forgetting?" And then, for the first time in years, she wrote his name, Harold, in capital letters, like a warning. But then she did something more radical. She wrote, "Why do I still keep him alive?" It was an idea she had never confronted. That part of Harold's long life wasn't in Harold's hands. It was in hers. He was still alive in her voice, in her breath, in the way she flinched when someone raised their tone, in the way she couldn't let her husband hug her from behind without her stomach tightening. She carried him every day. David Goggins, the ex-SEAL and endurance icon, once said in a video, "You either suffer the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. You pick." That quote looped in her mind as she wrote for hours. Was she ready to suffer the pain of discipline, of changing not Harold but herself? She closed the notebook and whispered, "I want my body back." Healing didn't begin in a yoga pose. It began in a scream she let out in the forest 2 days later. A scream that was 30 years late, primal, full-throated, animalistic, then silence, and then laughter. Not joyful, but raw. It was the laughter of someone who finally realized I'm still alive. She wasn't dead, not like her husband, not like the girl she used to be. She was still here, and she could still choose. In the following months, she stopped talking about Harold in therapy. Not because she forgot, but because she finally believed she was no longer his hostage. Instead, she started learning breath work, cold exposure, visualization. She listened to Dr. Joe's talks at sunrise, did cardio at sunset with Goggins' audio screaming, "Get hard, stay hard." And when people asked why she was glowing, she smiled and said, "I fired my inner warden." What she didn't tell them was that healing wasn't beautiful. It was brutal. It meant deleting every maybe he didn't mean it from her vocabulary. It meant forgiving herself for staying silent. It meant mourning the mother who never protected her. But it also meant this. For the first time in decades, her nightmares stopped, and Harold, the ghost of him, began to disappear. It wasn't until the letter arrived that she realized healing doesn't stop just because you've decided to move on. It was addressed to her married name, which meant someone had gone looking. Handwritten, no return address. Inside was a short, trembling paragraph. "I'm nearing the end of my time. I don't know if you'd want to see me, but I've been thinking about what I did. I never said I was sorry, not even once. I don't know if that matters now, but if you want to visit, I'll be here. Until I'm not. H.G. Harold." She stared at the paper for nearly an hour, not crying, not raging, just still. For all the books, for all the breathing techniques, for all the spiritual reframing, her hands still trembled. Because the child in her, the one who had buried entire pieces of herself, had waited 37 years to hear that sentence. "I never said I was sorry." But what did it mean now? Did it absolve anything? Or was it just a man afraid of hell writing a selfish goodbye? That night she didn't journal. She sat in a chair, silent, eyes open. Her husband had once asked her long before his heart gave out, "If he ever says sorry, will that fix it?" She'd answered no, but it will mean I wasn't crazy. Now here she was, holding the proof. And she didn't feel better. She felt confirmed. She didn't go see him. But she drove to the hospice, sat in the car outside, watched the windows. She imagined him inside, weak, old, small. It was strange. For the first time, he felt like a human, not a monster, not a god of punishment, just an old man with no more power than the bed he couldn't leave. She thought of what Goggins once said in a podcast. "You've got to take souls, but not in vengeance. In silence. In becoming something they'll never touch again." She realized she didn't want revenge. She wanted release. So she got out of the car, walked to the front desk, and left a note. Not to him, to herself. It read, "You do not owe pain your loyalty." She folded it, slipped it into the visitor logbook, walked away. The next week she lit a candle for her husband. It was his birthday. She sat in their old backyard, barefoot in the grass. A breeze moved the branches and she felt him. Not as a ghost, not as grief, but as grounding. He had loved her with all her brokenness. Never tried to fix her. Never asked her to explain the nights she couldn't sleep. Never judged the cold hands, the quiet stares, the sudden jolts in crowds. He loved the version of her that survived, and in doing so, he taught her how to live. She whispered into the wind, "I'm not afraid of outliving pain anymore. I'm not afraid of lasting longer than injustice." Because that was the final illusion, that life was supposed to be fair, that only the good should be granted time. But maybe time wasn't a gift for the good, maybe it was a test for the broken. And Mara, she was finally ready to pass it. 2 months later, she got the call. Harold had died, peacefully in his sleep. No funeral was planned. No family wanted to claim him. The nurse simply asked if she'd want to be notified of his cremation. She said no. Instead, she walked to the same forest where she had once screamed. She brought the cardigan. She sat. She listened. Then she did something simple. She opened her notebook, the one from years ago, and wrote, "He died at 94, but I stopped carrying him at 41. And then, this isn't the end of a story. It's the start of a woman." She folded the page, pressed a flower inside, and closed the book. The wind moved gently, rustling leaves. For once, she didn't think of fairness, or karma, or cosmic punishment. She thought of breath, and how she had learned to own hers again, not in spite of the evil that lived too long, but because she chose to outlive its grip.